You guys, this house in the picture right here is owned by the Zamet family. These guys were offered $50 million for their house from a local real estate developer, and for some reason, they're refusing to sell. Somebody on Twitter here put together a time lapse that shows us what this house and the surrounding area has looked at over the years. You can see here the house used to be surrounded by a bunch of other big lots and a couple of other smaller houses, but now it's just surrounded by hundreds of other homes. I cannot imagine living in this place and turning down a $50 million offer to move out of my house. There's got to be more to the story here. Let's dive into it. This home is actually located in Australia, and it is sitting smack in the middle of a huge suburb out there called the Ponds. The satellite view on Google Maps isn't all that current. It still shows a bunch of dirt around the property, but you can see all these areas on the outskirts of where this main property is have now been developed with homes that are basically one on top of the other. If we drag this guy down to street view, you can get a little bit more of a current photo. I mean, just look how ridiculous this looks, you guys. We've got a 650-foot driveway that cuts through the lawn and leads up to this house. And Google's kind of weird with their mapping, but if we turn around and look across the street, you can see these homes here that are basically also just built on top of each other. Then when we turn back around and head over here just a little bit, you can see that the homes that are built right next to the Zamet house here are kind of in a similar style. And then if we drive down the road here a ways and we turn into the community that's actually being built, again, the Google images get a little outdated because this shows all of the construction that was happening. So these shots are probably a couple years old, but this just goes to show the type of development that's happening in this area. They're trying to cram as many homes into the ponds as possible. It's pretty interesting for me as a guy from the US to see how homes are developed in Australia. It's almost like there's not any setback rules. Out here in Arizona, you usually have setbacks of 4 or 5 feet for every house, meaning that the outside wall of your house is always going to be at least 8 to 10 feet away from the outside wall of your neighbor's house. Anyways, 50 million bucks, that's what the developer is offering this family for their house, but why aren't they selling? Well, for one, holding off has shown to be a really good strategy because just 10 years ago when all of this first started, the Zamet property was only worth around $4.75 million at that time. Nowadays though, due to how much more developed the area has become, their property is said to be valued at around $10 million per acre, and at 5 acres, that means their place is worth 50 million bucks. Now to me, this wasn't exactly computing. I mean, $50 million for just 5 acres sounds a little insane, but there's got to be some major upside for these developers if they're willing to pay that much. Well, apparently the lot size on one of these new homes that they're building in the area is only 3,200 square feet, which means if a developer buys the Zamet lot, they can fit around 50 homes onto that single 5-acre lot. I looked at some of the homes in the surrounding area, which we can check out here in a second. They're selling for around $1.5 million a piece, which means that the total sellout would be around $75 million if the developer did buy this land and build 50 houses, then sell those 50 houses. Still seems pretty tight to me, unless the cost of construction in Australia is just crazy low, but I wasn't able to verify that information. What I did pull up was a bunch of listings of homes that are for sale in these new developments that are on either side of the Zamet's house, because unfortunately there's not any photos of the Zamet house itself, at least on the inside. So check it out. Australia has this website that's kind of like Zillow. It's called realestate.com/AU. You can see all these dots here are houses that are currently for sale. I've already clicked on a couple of them. That's why a few are gray. There's this place at 41 Conruss Crescent. It's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath, and 301 square meter home, which by the way, for everybody living in the US like me, 301 square meters equates to about 3,200 square feet. Anyway, this house looks tiny from the outside, but it's actually really clean and nice inside. I think they picked out some good finishes and furniture. Totally looks like a good little family home. Here's another one at 121 Beauchamp Drive. This home is a 4-bedroom, 2-bath. They don't list the square meters on this one, and only a few photos of the inside, but it looks nice too. Then a few doors down, there's another house for sale at 127 Beauchamp Drive. This one is 288 square meters, and it looks like a single level. They actually included the floor plan on this one, and check it out. This is pretty crazy. So the house is so narrow that you walk through the front door here, and you've got all of your bedrooms on this one side of the house that would be to your left. And then on your right side of the house is where you would pass by the powder room, the laundry room, the kitchen, the living room, and the dining room. The inside of this one is the same vibe as the others. It's simple, it's clean, it's got nice finishes, and this one even has a little backyard too. My whole take on this entire story is that, for one, it's obviously super fascinating, and for two, I kind of respect the fact that this family has stood their ground and they're just refusing to sell. The only thing I just cannot wrap my head around is why these guys are refusing to sell, because I just feel like if I was in their shoes, I would absolutely sell if I owned this property and I was offered that much money. Just to see if other people had the same opinion as me, I went to the comment section of this New York Post article, so we got to check a few of them out together. Nuts and Bolts, this one has a ton of thumbs up. He says that sometimes money isn't all that important. The only problem is the developers will find a way to impose restrictions on their property, then will increase the property taxes because of the increased value of their neighbors. They should take the money and run. Eric von Straheim says, I fail to see the reason for their attachment to this home. They're surrounded by monolithic homes. If they're after what they had prior to the build out of the surrounding homes, they could take that cool $50 million offer from the developer, find an exact property like that elsewhere without the surrounding suburb. Maybe they're too old to move. And I think that too old to move factor is probably it. I think that whoever lives here, whether it's a couple or maybe just a widow, they're probably too old to have to deal with getting all their stuff out. That house is probably full of furniture and memories. And for them, it's just much more worth it to stay put and live out their life in this house versus having to deal with moving, because, come on, we all know moving's pretty stressful. Noib Bayan says, I would take the $50 million. They have no privacy. There is noise. Their spectacular views are gone. It's not what it was. It's wise to know when it's time to give up, change course. Good point, and I do think this is valid advice, but again, only if they're younger and they're in a position where that $50 million would actually change their life. Illegitimate Joe says, gee, I thought it was all gas-powered cars that were causing the sea level rise. Could it be all of that land that used to be able to absorb rainwater that's now blacktop that won't? Sunken Treasure says, my God, this house is in the middle of a prison camp. These surrounding houses are packed tighter than a mobile home park. No thanks. Hank Jones says if this house was in the US, the government would just take it through eminent domain and hand it over to the developer. The homeowner would receive some sort of compensation for the property, though. I'm not entirely sure that that's true. Maybe if the city needed it for some reason, but I don't think the government would just take over. Jersey says, good for them. They should get a lot of manure and spread it all over the property and give them a taste of their medicine. Not sure what that means, but sounds pretty savage. Then RLS News says take the money and have them move the house. Not a horrible idea. There's definitely plenty of stories out there where houses and real estate has been literally moved thousands of miles. So if they love the house that much, then just have the developers move it somewhere else. I've been saying $50 million throughout this video because that's what all the other news outlets are reporting on as well. But to be clear, it's actually 50 million Australian dollars. I think that's what you call it, Australian dollars, right? AUD or whatever, yeah, Australian dollars. 50 million Australian equates to only about 34 million US dollars. But everything I've said in this video still stands. If I were in their shoes, and even if I was only walking away with 34 million US dollars, I would still take that money and run. 34 million bucks could buy you some pretty amazing stuff. It's definitely enough to buy another big property. We've got something like this estate in Rhode Island that's sitting right on the water and on 45 acres. This one recently sold for only $16 million. There's this monster of a home in the middle of the desert out not far from where I live that recently sold for $24 million. You could buy this awesome new construction spec mansion in Bel Air for just $26 million. This place in Fort Worth has got 63 acres, tons of privacy, and their own pond, and they're only asking $20 million for this one. You guys get the point. There is a lot that you could do with a $34 million payday. So earlier, I think we figured it out. Yes, it's possible that the Zamets have all these memories in their their home and they've just been there too long to want to move, but it's probably more likely that they're just too old to want to move. Come on though, I mean, look at this place again. These guys have lost all their privacy at this point with dozens of two-story houses that are looking at them from literally every direction. Plus, their whole neighborhood at this point has totally lost all that charm that it once had. When you buy a house, it's almost impossible to predict something like this happening. I'm gonna guess that the Zamets had no clue that their neighborhood would be developed like this at some point. But there are some things that you can predict and forecast happening to your house and in your neighborhood, which is one of the reasons why I started my first time Homebuyer Academy training, which is so close to being released. If you guys haven't heard me talk about this before, long story short, I've got a training that I've built out for first-time homebuyers that kind of combines all of my experience as a mortgage banker and as a real estate investor, and I use that experience to basically just walk you through the process of buying your first house. If you're thinking about buying your first house at any point in the near future, then you should click on the link down in the description that says course coming soon. I'm going to be sending an email to everybody who puts their information into that link with a special discount code as soon as this training is released. I can't promise you that if you take my training that your house is not going to end up surrounded by a bunch of other houses like the Zamets, but I can promise you that I'll help you to be a little bit more prepared to buy your first house. That's it for this one. I'll see you next time.